Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's talk. Thank you so much for joining Lee and I on the stage this morning. And we extend that welcome probably with the most feeling we ever have at the start of one of these talks. It's great to see you here in situ, face to face again, and not on the end of another Zoom call.
Indeed it is, Paul, and given the very nature of the wonderful world of hospitality that we're all in, and of course the independent accommodation sector, the lockdowns arguably hit this industry in more depth and more than a lot of other industries. So from a business perspective, it's great that we're all back. And for those of you who work in hospitality, those of you who thrive in it, and want to see guests and people in your properties each and every day, I'm sure you'll all agree, it's great that we're able to do that again, and very special to be here.
We really empathise with the challenges that your businesses have faced over the last year and a half or so. We've certainly lived that and seen that through the eyes of our customers. It's been the most difficult time our industry's faced in a generation, and it certainly has been for eviivo too. So I'd just like to also say, great to be here in situ.
Okay, so to navigate through the last 18 months, we've all had to be, and hopefully we'll see the slide coming up on the screen, all had to be particularly chameleon-like with the fella on the screen there, as we've had to navigate the environment around us. So we've had to adjust, adapt, innovate, as well as hang on, of course, through those very challenging times. And we think the independent accommodation sector should be proud of how it stood up to this. So you have pivoted your businesses, pulled together as people, developed new processes, adapted your product, and promoted your properties and your businesses in new and inspiring ways. And the clever use of technology has helped to facilitate this. So now what we're here to do and tell you and speak to you about today is to take stock of these adaptations and these 5 pillars that lots of businesses have gone through, using the experiences that we have seen and garnered from accommodation and property owners who use the eviivo suite, and share these learnings, as I said, through those 5 pillars. We can see, of course, through what we talk about over the next 20-25 minutes, the boost that these adaptations have given businesses during the pandemic and beyond now to power on to an even stronger position than was in place before.
So at eviivo, we really had to pivot very quickly, and when the pandemic kicked in, we started our eviivo Share webinars at the end of March 2020, and that was to help the industry come together as a whole for customers and non-customers alike to share ideas about how best to cope with the industry, adapt, survive, and ultimately thrive. And from that, we've learnt things that we're going to impart with you today. But to kick off with, I know it's early on a Monday morning, so just want to make sure everyone's awake. We've got a quick question for you here. So in challenging times, should you just stick to what you know? We'll have a show of hands for yes.
And you think you should stick with what you know in challenging times?
For no. Very good. Okay, good. So that's indicative of why you're here today, to hopefully learn about things and how things have changed. But what we learned by customers coming on to our eviivo webinars initially was that they adapted very quickly, with no bookings being able to come through their doors, to provide other services in terms of ultimately trying to replace revenue streams. Just going to touch on a few of these here now, because hopefully it might inspire and you to perhaps look at doing the same. We've got Penny and Gary in Gleneagles Guest House over in Southend. They started doing a delivery service for afternoon tea, and we were all on a whole bunch of Zoom calls, Zoom quizzes and the like at the time, and these proved super popular. But when guests returned again, they were still flying out the door and turned into a genuine new source of revenue for them. Next up, Birgit down at the Blacksmith Arms in Lewes. She started delivering her Sunday roast because unable to have patrons through the door to take those, and also started doing a beer takeaway service to get rid of the beer that she had left in the property initially, but soon was ordering many more barrels to facilitate the demand for a perfectly pulled pint in Lewes, and continues to be a revenue stream today. And then finally, Gemma at the Lansdowne in the Cotswolds. As business started to come back and leisure bookings could return, they had to do that within certain realms and certain social distancing measures. So she started doing breakfast boxes to provide B&B basis still to her guests that were arriving. And that's turned into a really popular option, and now is a pre-bookable option when guests book. So the takeaway here really is, if you do have a new product or a service that you've thought about trying in the past, give it a go. It may well turn into a new revenue stream for you. And if you can, make sure that that extra is pre-bookable in your software, in your booking platform when guests go to book.
So the first element that Paul talked about then was pivoting about products and services. The second one we're going to touch on in the pivot area today is all around the actual new markets and new business streams that people were able to find. It was, of course, as you'll remember, mainly key workers who were allowed to travel and stay in properties. So we heard of independent owners seeking out how to market to them, be that contacting local hospitals or medical centres, or indeed haulage, delivery companies, and people in the retail sector who obviously had to continue to work in their locations or sometimes away from their locations. Obviously, overall demand was much lower, so the sort of the battle for that market was more intense than it would already have been. This kind of shift and this pivot into new markets did provide a new source of bookings and relationships and word of mouth that built up that perhaps otherwise wouldn't have done, continues to provide a very steady stream for businesses going forward. And it's a blueprint as well to really proactively look for new business in markets that you've not thought of before. eviivo played their part in that as well during the course of the pandemic. We set up a specific site called Stays for Heroes to help accommodation owners market their site to those heroes who were on the front line. And I think at one point we had over 50,000 room nights available on that platform. And along with other channel manager plugins that we work with, like Beds for Builders, those made those searches more relevant and more able for those people in that hospitality, in that sector or those sectors to find new business as well. So key takeaway from this one is that this mindset should be for keeps, not to rely necessarily on your traditional strands and streams of businesses in the past. Obviously, cancelled bookings left big gaps in diaries, whether it be weddings or regular business. And the concept of understanding when a regular source of income goes away to be replaced by something else, something more imaginative or something you found under your own steam, is certainly a valuable lesson that's been learned through the pandemic.
So just building on this idea of looking at new markets, if your traditional ones maybe had dried up, when guests started to travel again in terms of on the leisure side, it was very much the younger demographic that pioneered the way for this. So being on websites such as Airbnb and Google certainly was important, and we saw a lot of our customers shift and start to take bookings through those sites more. Also, with regards to guests doing their research, they seem to be doing a lot more research and on a lot of bespoke and specific sites around a certain theme. Maybe a hobby that they picked up during lockdown, perhaps they'd got a new pet. That was super popular shifts we saw through the last 18 months or so. So sites like Pets Pajamas, again, another source of potential bookings coming through, and important to kind of try and tap into those markets if indeed you can. And then also the online travel agencies, of course, they did a lot of work to help try and drive guests coming back to stay once again. Booking.com had a bit of tech on their site that effectively looked at the strength of welcome for the LBGT market and was then able to help businesses target another individual sector within the industry to help stimulate and drive more bookings. So the takeaway really is to be mindful of these different markets, use technology that enables you to dip into these different types of markets to ultimately get your fair share of the bookings going forward.
Perfect, and that was covering off the pivot pillar. So we're moving on to the second area now of the focus, which of course is people, and a pertinent quote coming up there from Richard Branson, we think. The past 18 months have had a huge impact, of course, on people running their businesses, whether you run it more single-handedly as a couple, or indeed those of you who employ staff. The clear stresses and strains on those employees or yourselves running very different and modified businesses was very evident. And the health and mental well-being of staff was crucially important as well, to keep employees engaged and motivated, whether they were with you in your business at the time or separate from your business. And this period also provided a unique window of opportunity for people to redress any omissions in their staff training or their staff knowledge, and many elements of that have now continued to go through into the present day. So one of the biggest new normals under the course of the lockdowns and the reopenings was, of course, cleaning. We'll touch on this a few times through the course of the presentation because of how important it has been. Understanding yourselves and also your teams to deliver the new expectations around managing the cleaning protocols. All staff at all touch points clearly had to have a very robust and confident knowledge of all of those protocols. And training and awareness on this, of course, for your staff and yourselves was crucial. At eviivo, we wrote several blogs, and we also had some best practice webinars where cleaning experts came onto those webinars to share their knowledge, and we also helped develop lots of new detail into our cleaning reports as well to help move that forward. And we know as well from our friends at Trust You and Visit Britain that cleanliness, of course, continues now to remain one of those key indicators for bookings going forward. I think it's fair to say longer term, it probably won't be make or break in a booking journey, but the reassurance currently now and certainly into the medium term that people have to know that cleaning regimes and criteria put in place are there really do help change that booking conversion into someone who's looking into booking. And we know people are prepared at the moment as well to pay a premium for when they see those safety protocols in place. Also, during the course of the lockdown, that also gave opportunity for people to bring in staff to upskill on different areas of the business as well, whether it's your own operations or the time to actually invest and make sure that those staff that you had when you brought them back were great and a key part of your business. So giving people extra responsibility really helped businesses work a lot smarter.
So other set of people in and around businesses that need to be kept up to date with what was going on, of course, were key stakeholders, so maybe owners or other people that invested in the properties. We increasingly work with property management companies now at eviivo, so some of the feedback they gave us was that they needed better reporting in terms of keeping people abreast of everything that was going on. As bookings not coming in but money still going out, they needed to be clear and know where everything was. And it's a report, the owner-managed report that we developed is something that they continue to use today as a cornerstone for their business. But the takeaway here is that try and use the technology and simple reporting to really keep everyone abreast of what's going on, particularly in times troubled like the last 18 months or so. It's really important. Next up, and quite surprising, we found a lot of properties coming to us and starting to use our software through the course of the lockdowns themselves. So Jason, at Boscondel Manor down in Cornwall, 14 rooms there, he actually took the reins on the 1st of April 2020, so just after the first lockdown. And obviously quiet, no guests in house. He used the time very productively, getting everything set up, but crucially made sure all his presence online was ready to go when guests could come back again. So pictures on point, descriptions duly done, everything that he was doing around the property to make it a safe place to have a holiday was all out there on his own website and on his distribution sites. And this is really important, obviously, to continue to do now and a good takeaway, and it paid dividends for him being very full over the last couple of summers. As a new business, that was really good. And then finally, a bit more feedback from the property management companies. A lot of those used the quiet time so not looking after the guests, they were then looking at other opportunities within the marketplace. So looking to add to their stock, adding extra rooms, adding extra property to ultimately benefit from the boom in staycations that was predicted and subsequently transpired. So Cotswold Cottage Gems, Newlands Lodges, Cozy Dragons, all these guys added to their inventory and reaped the rewards for that once guests could come back. So finally then, final question for today, I think, or is it second question? One more. Round process this time. So the question is, should the mantra, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, be your go-to ethos? So a show of hands for yes. A show of hands for no. These questions are a lot easier than I thought they were going to be. Okay, so yeah, with regards to processes, we just want to call out a few things that we noticed through the course of the last 18 months that we think have been really beneficial to businesses and customers alike, that we'd advocate you continuing to do going forward. Lee's already mentioned the benefit of being and doing all these things, continuing to do them around safety, and to highlight that online. But that's, of course, your sanitizing stations, your airing between rooms, between bookings, if you can do that, your cleaning, higher frequency of cleaning, but on key touch points throughout the business. Keep those up, because ultimately guests will recognize that, they'll write good reviews based on it, and it will drive to further bookings going forwards. We've seen that. Another good shift and use of technology through the course of the last 18 months, and we've been big advocates of continuing with, is this idea of shifting away from your traditional in-room welcome guides and guest books to moving that to an online platform. A lot more information can be conveyed this way to guests before they stay, so they can really plan what they want to do when they get to the property and hit the ground running. And also, some of these apps enable you to actually turn it into your commercial advantage. If you've done deals with local restaurants or activity providers, you can pass those savings on to the customer and hopefully get a kickback and a revenue stream for yourselves. And then finally, around breakfast, loads of new processes bestowed upon you guys around this. A couple of two that we think are good to take away is this idea of trying to get your guests to pre-book what they're going to eat for breakfast that following morning. So that helps reduce wastage, of course, and also gives the chef the heads up of a morning to best plan their shift. And with regards to breakfast, the other point we'd make is trying to get guests to also pre-book their time slot within the breakfast room. It just makes for a much nicer, less crowded atmosphere and a much more peaceful and relaxed start to the day for everyone.
Okay, and still onto processes, and again, we said we'd come back onto this section, but making sure all the great things that you were doing in your properties relation to processes as well, having them constantly updated and reflected in descriptions that you put on your own websites or on greater expanse of online exposure. People still needed to see that having a clean and safe environment was and still is key. So with people traditionally looking on the big online travel agencies first for inspiration, it's crucial that your properties are always looking their best on them, especially all the relevant information around the measures that were taken to provide those clean and healthy stays. The online agencies themselves obviously were very, very fervent about this and understood that would be a key driver to people engaging with them and increasing booking levels. So the screenshots you see here are just showing how the OTAs, the online travel agencies, reacted to the requirements to introduce these new attributes and show them online so that people had an idea of them through their booking journeys.
And then the final bit on processes is just around that guest journey. We certainly saw the need for guests to be much better and more kept up to date with what was going on with their bookings due to the fluctuations and moving around of them over the last 18 months or so. And lots of eviivo customers using the email functionality and automated functionality within the suite in order to do that. The other thing we noted was that there was a lot more use of online check-in, of course, because the need to social distance. And again, lots of customers increasingly using that in eviivo suite. But now what we're seeing is that it's something to continue to be used because it's really turned into a better service and a nice additional service for the customers, making for a much nicer check-in process. We've also partnered up with a couple of other companies to offer even more flexibility in this area in Dune and also Guest Talk, who are here today. And customers are now using this technology to communicate with their staff as well in terms of managing their business. Another great thing around processes that we saw come in was this idea of key boxes and keyless entry systems. Andy Rudd, an owner at in Southwold Sutherland House, he said this was the best investment he's ever made because it's freed up his staff having to spend time behind a reception desk all day, waiting for people to hopefully turn up when they said they would. And it gives him that much more flexibility to pass on to his customers, a wider window of when they can arrive. So again, seen as a better service for his customers. And then finally, on the checkout end of the stay, again, moving a lot of this online is now seen by the guest as a really useful tool, enabling them to pay for their balances, anything that they've had in their stay in the minibar, etc. Doing all that before they can then just seamlessly leave the property, no longer need to queue up at desk to leave. It makes for a much smoother journey for the guest, and also this kind of online communication piece is enabling businesses to further follow up with guests and ultimately hopefully get a good review from them. So whilst a lot of this tech in terms of has limited time with the customer for the mundane things like the admin, taking of payment, checking and so on, hopefully it will free up your staff and your time to spend more time with the guest, more quality time, that leads to better service and ultimately better reviews.
Great, thanks, Paul. And then moving on to the fourth pillar now, and I promise this is definitely the last of the show of hands. Might be a different split in opinion here, we'll see. This is about product and focusing on what businesses did essentially with the bricks and mortar that they had to hand on their own properties, and investigating on ways to expand and differentiate the products that they've actually got. So a final question for today that's on the screen there. Is it a good idea to spend money investing in your business when you're not able to take bookings? So as a yes for hands and a no. Oh, it's all yes again. Okay, so it's obviously all down to individual circumstances, but we have witnessed, we're going to just play testimony to some of those now, some interesting changes and investments that were made by owners through the last 18 months. So the closure periods really did give people a chance to take a look at their properties and to view them from a guest perspective, making necessary improvements along the way. We at eviivo, and when we speak to our property owners, always strong advocates of making sure that every once in a while you relive that guest experience that you're giving to people from your own perspective. So it'll only be then when you potentially do uncover some of those niggles of things that people may not complain about, but may have a little niggle about as they leave. So, you know, anecdotally, the squeaking of the ensuite shower room door that wakes someone up in the middle of the night, or the lack of hangers in the wardrobe, all important things to check that your product there is doing what it says on the tin. And we know, of course, of many other owners who went on to do some further, more detailed and more dynamic upgrade projects. With all improvements, though, we'd always call out here to make sure to promote them and get good new images of what you do online as soon as possible. So on the screen, you should see there the Thai Namara on the Isle of Col. That's owned by a lady called Paula, and she actually built the new decking that you can see on the screen there, and that takes in the views of Mull and the Treshness Isles, and she developed a new menu and takeout service to have on that decking as well. So again, just a proof positive about how people sort of invested and used some capital to make the product even more differentiated than it was before. Getting those images and new descriptions of what you've done online is also extremely useful. Are your photos as bang up to date as they can be? Are they years out of date? Nowadays, the resolution quality of photos online is paramount, and really something that, if it hasn't been done already, should focus on improving the product going forward. And we make no apologies for our reminder. We're told about it all the time by our partners at the online travel agencies about the importance of bathroom photos. Images play an enormous part in what people see online. They take away the need to put lots and lots of text in place to describe things. So it's really, really important that bathroom shots are included in your descriptions, because they're a real make or break for people deciding to book. And keeping that content fresh and current is obviously making sure that you stand head and shoulders above the rest.
Sorry, Lee, I jumped the gun then.
It's all right.
Some of the people that we're talking to, the owners, over the course of the last 18 months, have actually taken that even further and actually changed the setup of their rooms, or indeed added rooms, to ultimately maximise revenue when the staycation boom kicked in. So Richard at Roundabout Farm over in Norfolk, he had one of his properties sleeping 12. When the rule of 6 came in, he split that property with a dividing wall that he built, an interconnecting door in between that remained locked, of course, and then was then able to sell that property in 2 sets of 6, and ultimately in the peak season now makes more money doing it that way than he ever has done selling it as the whole property. Liz at Bully Barton House in Devon, her rooms traditionally sold on a B&B basis, but she added extra catering facility into those rooms, so she could now offer the rooms as self-catering or indeed B&B based, because she had separate entrances to the rooms. And of course, going forward, can now offer both those board bases, tapping into more different markets in terms of demand. And then the guys at Samely House, they were fortunate to have ground around their property, so they'd already added in shepherd's huts to increase their capacity and ultimately reap the reward of that when staycation shot up the last couple of years. And we saw many other properties doing that by adding yurts or glamping pods to increase that capacity. The key thing here, though, is that as you're changing the way you sell your rooms on different board basis, different prices for each probably, and adding inventory, you need to have a great platform and flexibility of the platform to enable you to do this, to sell the rooms through your website, but also onto the online travel agency sites. So important to invest in something that can do that. And another interesting investment we saw businesses doing a lot of over the last 18 months was use rate shopping tools, whereby they automatically plug in and give advice on what you should set your rates based on demands, of course, and your competitors, as well as anything that's happening in the local region at the time. Maybe it's a concert, maybe it's another boom, another reason for people to come to the particular area festival. But essentially, what these rate shopper tools do is tell a guest, tell a business when to lower their prices in the shoulder season, how much to go down to ensure they get their bookings, and also the price when the demand is high to make sure you're not setting your prices too low, so still fill your rooms but not sell the rooms too cheaply. And we now partner with a couple of companies doing this that plug straight into our diary to offer that rate advice in Room Price Genie, who are here today, and also Price Labs. And we know that's going to be something of the future that's going to be super useful to people going forward.
Great, and then the last pillar to focus on today is all about promotion. And when we say promotion, we also mean communicating that, because all of the things that we've talked about operationally so far, anything about promoting and communicating those changes is absolutely key. And of course, through the pandemic and now out the other side, hopefully, the communications bar has been set even higher and now demanded even more so by guests. So the question we put out to you, but don't have to answer this one, it's not a quiz. Are you really set up to shout from the rooftops about what your property is promoting?
So things that we think you should continue doing that we've started in the last 18 months going forwards are things like highlighting, we've said it already, but don't hesitate from pushing it again, this how you're effectively proving to be more safe for your guests online, offering a safer stay for them. So things like the Visit Britain Good to Go scheme, we're big advocates of. The AA COVID Confidence scheme, big advocates of those. They give you badges, you can get them onto your websites, and they will of course drive further bookings. Promos are also another great way to get guests to book, certainly in the shoulder seasons, as we're seeing now. But going forward, the promo manager in eviivo Suite was really used a lot through the course of the last 18 months or so. Voucher code to enable booking through your own website, commission free at a lower rate to help you capture that booking through your own site. And then finally, with regard to PR, there has been PR opportunities out there in the last 18 months or so. We've managed to secure some 200 pieces or so for eviivo customers in that time. But the takeaway here is that to keep an eye out for those opportunities, if you're doing something special at the property, launching new rooms, etc., this can be really valuable in terms of promoting your property going forward and, of course, ultimately get you more bookings.
Yeah, and as the pandemic hit, of course, communication was absolutely critical. First of all, to communicate, of course, or to clarify that the guests were no longer able to stay at your properties, and management of this was obviously crucial to making sure that they would come back and they would consider you again when things got back to normal. So now we are near back to normal. Well-designed emails are absolutely critical, possibly even at a more increased rate than they ever have been before as well, because they've become a bit more expected about guests, to give them more confidence about their arrival experience and what they're going to have when they get there. They're also, of course, a great tool to build a bit of pre-stay excitement as well, to make sure people are geared up and really looking forward to their stays, and start to build some loyalty with you and your property, and potentially the opportunity to sell in any additional services that you want to offer, whether it's in-rooms, dining, or things that you've got on the site of your property that can then really enhance their stay. And when online travel agencies, of course, whilst they continue to be a very cost-effective way to market your rooms, a conversion path that starts on an online travel agency does not have to stop there. Around 70% of people want to find a property on the online travel agency to get an idea of what's available, but they look through those travel agencies with a view then to moving on to Google to find more about your own individual properties and the nuances and the greater detail that your websites can tell and the stories that they can tell as well. So potential guests seeing your websites after that give a window of opportunity, as I said, to book directly. Often that will be on a commission-free basis. So use this as well as a reason with some of the excellent website designs that you've got yourselves or that eviivo can provide to make sure that guests do book, promote that with perks, discounts and promo rates. And as long as making a booking on your website is easy, it's a couple of clicks, it can be done on any device, and with the secure handling, most importantly, of their payments as well, you really are good to go. And then lastly, not to forget at all the extra value and the extra support and assurance that local agencies give you in different areas of the UK, whether that's associations or tourist boards. They have also become increasingly important to bring people out of the pandemic, and the support they give local areas is amazing. And I think we've now partnered with about 70 of these sites now, destination management sites, to promote properties on these extremely important channels as well.
So just some final thoughts then today before we let you go and enjoy the rest of the show. This of course has been a really difficult time for the whole world, and none more so than the independent accommodation sector. But it has also been a time of innovation and opportunity, and we hope we've conveyed some of that through to you today. Now we're moving into a period of recovery, thank goodness, back to some normality. It's an exciting time to use that knowledge that we have, combine it with the great tech that's out there, to ultimately give you guys competitive advantage going forward, so you can bounce back strongly and have great seasons going forward. We've certainly learned loads as a company in the last 18 months or so, and done lots of development on the back of that to hopefully help give businesses like yours the tools. So we'd be delighted if you come and have a chat to us over on the eviivo stand just behind the stage here later today. But if you just want to come and grab a coffee, James is at the bar there waiting for customers, I can see, waving. Come out, they're all free, the coffees, and also try and your hand at Crooked Duck. See if you can win a prize. But that just leaves me to say thanks again for joining us today. It's been great to see you all.
Enjoy the rest of your time here. Thank you very much. Thank you.